Okay, so we're going to start the next presentation. And it was supposed to be held by Dietrich von Seggern, one of my guys. He tore his Achilles tendon, and it's very cumbersome for him to travel with a cast at his leg. So I'm stepping in for him here. I think by now you've figured out who I am. And I'll jump right into the presentation itself. Who hasn't figured out who I am?
You're Stefani, you.
We'll have a private conversation. I'm going to speak about PDF A-2 and PDF A-3, ISO standards for archiving based on PDF. And I'm talking specifically about a feature that is indicated by the term of collections, which refers to the possibility to embed files inside PDF files. That's a relatively new thing. Was just added for PDF A2 last year by publication of the PDF A2 standard. And it's going to be added for PDF A3 later this year because the standard is still in the last phase of confirmation and publication. First, I would like to describe what embedding files into PDF means. Most of you are aware of some of the stuff you can do, but maybe not of everything. And it's both a kind of feature overview of what you can do and also how you encode that technically. And then as a second half, I'm going to discuss a few things around what that means in the world of PDFA. Who of you has been doing stuff with PDFA? Okay. Who of you has already some understanding of what PDF A2 is? Okay, okay, good. Okay, why would you want to embed stuff in PDF files? And the reason could be that you want to represent an email as a PDF file. And emails, as we know them today, have a body, but they also often come with an attachment. And sometimes the attachment can be represented as PDF. If it's just, let's say, a Word document, you could convert it to PDF, and then you have another PDF document. In the kind of least elegant approach, you could concatenate the body with the PDF from the Word document. But once you run into files that are not easy to convert to PDF, it becomes more difficult to do something useful with it. Still, if you want to convert your email into PDF, it would be nice if you have everything in one place in just one file. So one option would be to put whatever file that is simply inside the PDF file so that you are using the PDF as a container. So that would be an interesting use case for embedding files, PDF and non-PDF files in some other PDF document. It could be a technical drawing that's kind of a special case where the original file maybe can be converted to PDF in some way, but not with all of its information and semantic. So a complex model, you can of course create a kind of printout in a PDF, but the original file carries more information than is reflected in the PDF printout, so to speak. You could also decide you want the source documents for your PDF files, whether you have Microsoft Word or Excel or something else. For some reason, you would like to keep the original inside the PDF file. So maybe later on you can extract the Word or Excel document and do things with that. There are also areas where you may want to associate PDF files with XML data. And one of the use cases, in this case not just with PDF but with PDFA, is now has emerged in Germany. That's what we call Personenstandsregister, which is the registry of birth certificates, death certificates, marriage certificates, and so on. And in 2009, legislation was published that this register shall be electronic and not in paper form as in the past. So it becomes easier to exchange information across the country. And the approach to do that is to use PDFA for the visual presentation, but to also have an XML representation of the same certificate. And actually, it's the XML representation that is digitally signed with a qualified digital signature, and that is the original. So if there's any doubt about the actual content of that certificate, you may have to look at the XML, because the PDF is just a printout. For obvious reasons, just having the XML is not very convenient, because normal people will probably prefer something more easily readable. So that are just some use cases. In Germany, there's currently a pretty new initiative discussing exchange of emails between smaller companies, where you have the invoice as PDF format, and you stick the core data of your invoice inside the PDF file. So large companies already have established protocols like EDI and so on, but for smaller companies, something easier is desirable. So putting files inside a PDF file is not really something completely new. It was introduced in PDF already in version 1.1, so that's a long time ago. I don't know, 94, 95, whenever 1.1 came out. You may know more exactly.
I wrote the implementation of the first one.
Okay. Yeah. So if you need to know anything about a 1.1 implementation of PDF, Bill is the guy to go to.
I forgot about it.
And it was, compared to what we have today, straightforward and simple thing using file specifications. So in essence, you have a reference to an external file, like some kind of path that's pointing to the file with a file name. That could be either a string or a dictionary. And if you go beyond just having the file reference there, you could also include some information. In that case, it would have to be a dictionary, so you can have several pieces of information in that file specification. So it's been around for a long time. And then going to 1.3, you could have embedded file streams. Sorry, I was slightly incorrect. Before in 1.1 it was references to outside files. In 1.3 it's references to files that are inside the PDF file. So embedded file streams. The mechanism is the same. You have a file specification describing what file you're referring to, but instead of having the file outside of the PDF, you have it inside the PDF. And the key for that kind of dictionary would be EF for embedded files, and it contains the actual reference. And you could do that through the embedded files entry in the document's name dictionary, like the name dictionary where all the references to these files live. This is the browse PDF structure view from Acrobat Preflight. So it's like you have the catalog of the root object, and there's an entry inside called the names object, and inside that you have the embedded files compartment, so to speak, and there inside you have a tree of entries for one or more such embedded files. And then you have the actual information, so it's compressed, it has some filter for the stream, you have some parameters for it. You also indicate what the subtype is, so you know what to expect from the file. You could have a thumb entry, kind of small preview, and so forth. And that is what it may look like in the UI. So this is a pre-flight report, and the file that has been pre-flighted is embedded in the report, and it's just shown by the user interface in Acrobat at the bottom. And you could double-click and open it in Acrobat, or you could also save it to disk and then do other things with it. So it's also been supported relatively well in the user interface of at least some implementation, not just Adobe implementations of PDF viewers. Or you could embed the file as a file attachment. And then it would live inside an annotation, a file attachment annotation, and would just be referenced from the file attachment annotation. And the annotation itself, of course, would live on some page. And in this case, doing it that way, you would have somewhere on the page your appearance for the annotation, which could be a paperclip, could be something else as a symbol. And you would use that to get to the file. And yeah, that's kind of, so you click it and then you will get some UI that allows you to save the file to disk. I already said something about the content for the file specification dictionary. So you can indicate what file to expect based on a MIME type, and it just uses a normal way MIME types indicate the type of file. And you could also add some other information that is typical for use on an operating system. So what is the size of the file, what is the creation date for the file, and so on. So that is, if you, this parent entry was closed in the previous screenshot, so if you open it, you can have a checksum creation date. You can have stuff that is platform specific, like for the Macintosh, when it still was doing the resource fork thing, which is kind of two files in one file. You can have a pointer to the resource fork, and then the other thing, last modification date, size, in this case subtype, application/PDF. And these fields that you could have in a file specification dictionary could show up in the user interface as done by Adobe Acrobat, for example, where you have the modified date, the size, and maybe also the compressed size, so you know what the size inside the PDF is and what the size is once you extract it to disk. So this was there for a while, and then came PDF 1.6, and this was somehow a little bit extended because people started doing more with embedded files, and something as simple as a descriptive text string was added, so you could kind of manually enter, for example, some information about the file, which is very useful. If you just get a document with an embedded file, has a file name and maybe last modification date, the recipient may say, well, what shall I do with this file? I don't know. So you could just enter some text there. Again, this would show up in the user interface, and it's just as an example shown here. So you have a description field and can read the description from there. That was not enough. At that time, it was still Adobe thinking about how to taking a PDF to the next step. So they thought about what is called collections to have slightly more control over how embedded files would be presented in the user interface. So not just some stupid list, but maybe something more. And also have more control about the fields that you associate with the files in your PDF. And just as a visual example, this is like if you ask for a details mode, you would get a view like this one. If you ask for a tiled mode, you would get something like this. So it's like both on Windows and on Mac, you can change the way the operating system shows your file lists, and it's kind of similar to that. You can have just like large visual chunks and the file name below that, or you could have more information, and then using collections you could define which informations to show in which order and how they would appear. So that a date field is a date field and not just some sequence of digits and characters. And the whole thing was organized so that you have a container PDF. The container PDF has this information about embedded files that belong to this collection, and also some indication what file to open first. So the idea was you would not be looking at the envelope, so to speak. You would be looking at some predefined first file. So you double-click the thing. Instead of looking at the file per se, you're looking at whatever the author decided is the first file to look at. I'm sorry, I have to hesitate sometimes because I just took over the presentation. You have a number of ways to influence the display of this information. So you can define what the splitter bar is. You can define certain color aspects and so on. And in 1.7, the whole thing was extended into what is called Navigators. So it's even one step above, on top of collections. And I think looking at it visually kind of gives you an idea what this means. So before we had like lists, slightly more attractive lists and a tiled mode, but this really takes it one step further. And you have complete control over the visual appearance of how the files in the collection are presented. This is ultimately Flash-based, so you have a full programming environment at your fingertips, and you can make it any way fancy you want. And the goal was to add some features to the PDF syntax where you can make really attractive presentations around files that you want to exchange with somebody else. So you have all the whole imaging model that you can use in Flash and behavior of stuff. In the shipping products, some tools were delivered that kind of makes it easier for a normal person to put this together. But in theory, you could do your own Flash programming and do whatever you want. Whatever you can do in Flash, you can put inside here. There's some downsides to this approach. If you open this container PDF with stuff inside and collection or maybe a Navigator thing in some other application that decided not to implement these features, which were introduced in 1.6 and 1.7, extension level 3 to be precise, then you may just see the container PDF per se. You're just looking at the envelope. And the way at least Adobe programs create collections and with or without Navigators is that the container PDF just has placeholder content to inform you that you're not yet getting the full viewing experience that could be provided by the right tools. And this is unfortunately kind of has slowed down the adoption of this feature. So this is, I have to look. So Foxit, Nuance at least shows the embedded files, but it doesn't show the intended user interface. So it's, anyway. It works well in the tools that support it. That's mostly Adobe Reader, Adobe Acrobat. It doesn't work as well or not at all in other Adobe viewers. At the same time, so the Navigator, the definition of Navigators happened after PDF 1.7 became an ISO standard in 2008. So it was kind of Adobe's own extension of the PDF format, which is acceptable. Other developers do that themselves, sometimes in private, sometimes in public. And public means they share the specification of their private extension. And the Navigator was such an extension. And originally the idea was to make Navigators part of PDF 2.0 or ISO 32000-2. And we had a long discussion around that. It was very important to Adobe. That was very clear. Some other participants in the ISO committee thought it should not be inside PDF. And then after a long discussion, we decided to pull it out. So PDF 2.0 will not have the notion of Navigators. Adobe is still free to use their own language extension to PDF and offer products around that. Other developers are free to use the public specification of this private extension and to add features if they decide so. But it's not part of the default syntax of PDF 2.0. And why Adobe may be seriously annoyed by this, or was at that time at least, I think they have recovered. This is one clear indication. That's kind of the important point I'm trying to make here. It's not necessarily Adobe controlling the further development of PDF. It's absolutely not true. The committee was against this. Of course, Adobe provided all the specification. It was, I think it's 150 pages, and it was good specification, technically speaking. And the committee decided we don't want this. And Adobe is just a part of the US delegation. So the US delegation has one vote when it comes to voting. And even inside the US, they were fighting a little bit. But in the final votes, it was decided to not put it inside PDF. So maybe unfortunate for Adobe, but a clear sign that this committee is definitely not controlled by Adobe.
When was that vote taken? I'm just curious. You didn't mention.
Sorry?
When was that vote taken?
There's several phases in the ISO standardization process. So in the end, it was done in the committee, based on committee drafts. So while we are still working on an ISO document, there are committee drafts that are sent out, and people are not asked for a final yes or no, but they are asked whether the document shall proceed to the final vote, and they can submit comments. They can say, I like this, I don't like that. And the committee will have to resolve this. And usually it does work. So there were fights, yeah, but then we all say, well, what will probably be the result if we put it in, and in the final vote, everybody says, no, we told you, we don't want Navigators. Yeah, so it's just...
Well, but my question was that 2009, 2010, 2011?
I'm not 100% sure. I think it was last year.
Last year?
Yeah.
So even by then, maybe nobody decided they didn't want Flash as badly.
At that time, if it was last year, it was early last year, or it was late the year before. So it was still, Flash was still very high on the agenda. You could feel from the quality of the discussion. Of course, Flash has been repositioned, as we all know. And just to take this one step further, there were people saying, well, if we have a Flash navigator, and we are writing the year 2011, where HTML is so hot, yeah, why don't we have an HTML navigator? So, and I was one of those guys saying, well, I'd rather have an HTML5 navigator than a Flash navigator. It feels more natural to me. Not saying that it's necessarily better, but I like it. And so last year the preliminary decision was to have both Flash and HTML5. And then we realized how much work it is to spec out how to put an HTML5 or any other navigator inside the PDF syntax. And then we thought, well, this is really bloat. Like we're blowing up the whole PDF thing to something that's far bigger than it is today. And I don't think we're doing a favor to the industry. So that was kind of the ultimate decision to just pull off both. So no Flash navigator, no HTML navigator, nothing else. We're adding some touches, kind of indicators, how to present embedded files, like an advanced version of the list mode and the tile mode. But that's it. How you implement it, up to you. One other thing that gets added to PDF 2.0 is a concept that kind of has been lacking. So far you just had files, like a list of files, not structure. And PDF 2.0 adds folders. So you can have like a hierarchical organization of your files, which can be very convenient once you go beyond 3 files. And if you have 25 files, and they kind of belong to different logical categories, it's much nicer when you can structure the organization of the embedded files and display that accordingly in the user interface. So far about embedded files in PDF per se. Now I'm going to say a few things about embedded files in PDF-A. PDF-A1, that's very easy. They are not allowed. So in PDF-A1, you're supposed not to have any embedded files inside the PDF. There was this strong request from the archiving community. One PDF-A file is one document, full stop. Nothing else. No foreign content, no other document, whatever. It turned out that there are some user communities that think at least PDF-A files inside PDF-A files could make a lot of sense. Sometimes you have a group of documents that need to be archived as one unit. It would be very convenient to have that unit in the form of a file. Just when you move it around, everything stays together. Because of that, we decided in the PDF-A committee that we should allow such feature. And we limited the feature insofar as anything you put inside a PDF-A file must be a PDF-A file to ensure archival quality of the files. And you could have a folder with a number of documents, and you have to have a container PDF, and you're free to just have it as an envelope or just as a document on its own, and you can put other documents inside. You could even do a nesting. You could have a PDF-A file with a PDF-A file inside, which has a PDF-A file inside. That's acceptable. Whether it's smart is a different story. And there are a lot of cases where you have, for example, a Word document, an Excel spreadsheet, and a PowerPoint presentation. For PDF-A1, if you wanted to archive them as one piece, you would have to concatenate the documents into one file. Technically possible, but not ideal from a usage point of view. With PDF-A2, you can have an envelope or the main file, whatever it is, and just stick the other 2 or other 3 inside, and just keep them as separate files. This becomes especially important once you want to digitally sign files. So you sign the PDF from the Word document, and you sign the Excel spreadsheet from the PDF from the Excel spreadsheet. But they are signed independently during the workflow. And then later on, you need to archive them. If you want to keep the signatures, you have to keep them separate. At the same time, when PDF A2 was developed, we also did a lot of technical updates to catch up with the development in PDF. A1 was based on PDF 1.4, and PDF A2 is based on PDF 1.7 as defined in ISO 32000-1, excluding the extension level 3, which was the Navigator thing. And then we have PDF A3, still on its way. It's going to be published probably in the third quarter of this year. We also allow for embedded files in any format. You could even put a virus or an executable inside your file. We recommend against it. But from the point of view of PDF A3, it would not violate the PDF A3 standard. So as I mentioned earlier on, if you want to archive an email, you could decide to just put the attachment inside the main PDF file, and the attachment is whatever it is. It's okay in PDF A3. In PDF A2, you would have to first convert the attachment into PDF A.
What is the reason that you need PDFA then? Because the attachment might not be readable in 50 years.
The most obvious example is the Personenstandsregister, the registry of birth certificates that I was referring to.
Yeah, but
At the moment, the moment they have two representations of more or less the same content. And while they are not in an easy position to show how you can understand the XML file 100 years from now, they probably can guarantee that as long as PDFA is around, you can read the PDFA equivalent. So at least in terms of reproducing the visual appearance of the content, they are safe on that side.
So basically what you're saying is the A for archive is the PDF aspect of it, and the attachment, so to speak, of the convenience.
Therefore, convenience, actually, I believe the main reason comes from a different direction. The main reason is that in the real world, there's no sharp border between workflow and archiving. It's kind of intersecting in ways that are not always obvious. So the archive file for, let's say, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years may a file that easily gets entered back into the workflow. And then it might be very convenient to have the original data or file at hand for a number of reasons.
I could understand if you, let's say you archive an Excel spreadsheet, that you make PDFA out of the Excel, put this attachment next to the Excel original file as an attachment, then it would make sense. Otherwise, you can see maybe the email, but not the attachment at all in 50 years.
That's true. So actually, my recommendation would be that in that case, where you have an Excel spreadsheet maybe with macros and formulas and everything, which are interesting in themselves, but which would not be captured in a printout or conversion to PDFA, that if you want to archive that, so you make the PDFA rendition of the Excel file, and you have that, but you also keep the Excel spreadsheet. And in A3, you could just put the Excel spreadsheet inside the PDFA file. So in a way, you have the best of both worlds.
Yeah, but it's not mandatory to do that.
It's not mandatory.
I have a question on your first bullet there. You said on PDFA 1, obviously embedded files are prohibited, but file specifications may contain references to external files.
To external files.
So there is a dependency there on some other file system
It's a good question. If that referenced file is considered an integral part of the content, then it would be at least conceptually wrong, because the PDFA file shall be self-contained. Wherever you take it in the future, 5 or 50 or 500 years from now, the file itself should be sufficient to reproduce its content. File references could be a file reference to a file on the internet, for example. So you have something like a reference of documents, a list of references to documents, like in any bibliography. And you may indicate the source of the document you're referring to. And there's the same as with the book in the real world. The book contains a reference to this other document, which you may find in the bookstore today, but not 50 years from now. Or on the internet, which might be there today, but not in 50 years, or maybe not even in 50 days. And that's kind of acceptable, because the book on its own still makes a lot of sense. And that's the same thing. Because the file on the internet is a file, it's a file reference. So file references to external files are acceptable, and I think it's a good thing.
But as I recall, the files ref spec can appear even where there might be a content stream or other things, so that it's possible pathologically to make PDF.
No, what you mean is reference content.
Yes.
That's not allowed.
Okay. That makes a
So
lot.
those who have been in the PDF VT session have heard about referenced files in PDF VT, and this is not allowed. So content must not be referenced. So this reference is kind of pointers to other content.
Yeah.
It's not a reference to part of the actual content of the file. So for PDF A3, to get this whole thing going with embedded files, that could be any type of file, we have invented some syntax which is going to also be part of PDF 2.0. So we are working in parallel, or have been working in parallel on A3 and on PDF 2.0. And there's going to be an AF relationship entry for embedded files that indicates what kind of relationship exists between the embedded file and the containing PDF file. And in essence, that could be the embedded file is the source file, like you have the Excel spreadsheet converted to PDFA, and then it's the source. It could be data, just some scientific data that is somehow related to the document, or maybe to a pie chart. So you have an Excel spreadsheet where the data comes from, but you don't print the Excel spreadsheet, you generate a pie chart based on that. So that would be a data relationship. It could also be an alternate relationship, so it's yet another representation of the content. It could be the XML thing in our register for birth certificates. It could be an MP3 audio. That's kind of just a recording from somebody who read aloud the document. Or whatever. Whatever is yet another representation of the same content. It could be a supplement, some other files that have something to do with the content, useful files, whatever, or unspecified. You don't know, you don't want to say. And it's also okay to have a custom value, but then of course other people or software might not be able to make any sense out of that. And that shall be present for each of the embedded files in the PDF A3 file, so that you have some indication of what this is about. It's recommended to also make use of other mechanisms, like the description field for the embedded file, but it's kind of not mandated. And then you have the AF entry, which is a kind of table of contents for the embedded files, but it lives in different places in the PDF file. You could have a source document for the whole PDF, and then it would be associated with the whole document. Then the AF entry would sit in the catalog dictionary, which is the root of a PDF file. There would be a dictionary saying AF, and it would have a pointer to this other document, the Excel spreadsheet, from which the PDF was generated. If you look at, let's say, at this world of scans, you may have individual, let's say, TIFF files. Not very useful, but just to make the case. So you have TIFF 1, TIFF 2, TIFF 3. They ended up being inside the same PDF document, a 3-page PDF document. Then the source relationship would not be with the document, but for each TIFF file would be a relationship with the page. So the page entry would have an AF entry pointing to the TIFF file that's embedded. And the same is true for a number of other places. For those of you who have been in the PDF UA session, you could have in the structure tree for a tag PDF, at any point, you could have an AF entry and saying whatever is below this point in the structure hierarchy relates to this document, whether it's the source or an alternate representation. So if I wanted to enrich my tag PDF file with pre-recorded audio, I could decide that for every, let's say, paragraph or small chapter, I create an MP3 file. And I connect it to the structure tree node where it fits. And then if I had some tool that makes use of that, I could just jump from one node to the other and then listen to the recording for that piece of content. The same could be done for from-x objects, for annotation dictionaries, for dpart in a PDF VT file, and I think even one or two more places. So it's a very powerful and flexible architecture. It's obvious that maybe for a while the most typical use case will be a source file for the whole document, because that's easy to think and easy to indicate in the user interface. But I can also see that there might be specialized use cases and applications that do more specific use of this. To make it very clear, PDF A3 files are never PDF A2 files. So once you have files inside the PDF A file that are not PDF A themselves, then you're not PDF A2 compliant anymore. You will have to save it out as a PDF A3 file. So this is just a screenshot to show what this looks like. So this is, again, the names tree, embedded files compartment. We have some entry here, and then we have the AF relationship saying this is a source file for this embedded file. You may have a description. It's not mandated by PDF3, but it's useful. You have the AEF entry, which points to the actual embedded file, and you have an indication. Where is that? You have the file name, the Unicode file name. Yeah. And that is just an example. Sorry for the marketing pitch, but that's one of the tools that already does it. I think it's currently the only tool. And we wanted to come out early with some prototypical implementation just so that you can start playing around with it and figure out whether that's any use. So we can embed files. We can make a PDF A3 file and say, do not convert the files, just put them inside, and then just give me a PDF A3 file out of that. And then you can, in this case, select a folder, and it just grabs all the files, puts the files inside the PDF file, and then saves it out as a PDF A3 file. And here's the UI, how you could present that in the user interface. So there's a certain file, it may have a description or not, and the relationship is indicated, whether it's a source file, data file, whatever. That's the kind of user interface we are also expecting for other tools that are going to take advantage of this. And then something very nice about this, you don't necessarily have to have a PDF A3 enabled viewer to take advantage of this. So if you open a PDF A3 file, let's say with 3 files inside, Word, Excel, PowerPoint file, and you open it in some other PDF viewer that displays the list of embedded files and lets you do something with the embedded files, you can still make use of the files. You may not see the AF relationship if the tool is not PDF A3 enabled, but the files are there, and they are there for you to grab them and do something with them. And that may make the transition to the use of PDF A3 relatively easy, because even if once you have the PDF A3 file, you can even do something useful with the file without a PDF A3 enabled viewer, just with a normal PDF A viewer supporting embedded files. So again, my use cases, just to discuss them a little bit more. For archiving emails, in the interest of archiving and reproducibility in the long-term future, it would be nice if you could convert all the content to PDF-A. Yeah, you have the email body, you have a Word file. Just turn everything into PDF-A, put the Word PDF-A file inside the other PDF-A file for the body of the email, and you're good. You may decide to also put the original inside, because for an Excel spreadsheet, it might be interesting to look at the Excel spreadsheet, which makes sense at least in the next 5 or 10 years, because we probably have the tools to do so. You don't have to miss out on that option with PDF A3, but in that case, you would have to use A3 instead of just PDF A2. If you have attachments you can't convert to PDF A anyway, movie, you can't do that. Just stick it inside a PDF A3 file as a movie. Sorry, no PDF-A equivalent, but at least you have the movie. And at the moment, you may not have anything more archivable than the movie. For technical drawings, with accompanying data, again, depends on the data. In one case, you just make a PDF-A printout, so to speak, and put it inside. Or you also keep a copy of the original file. You can decide to start embedding your source documents and still archive that. And just for any Excel spreadsheet or Word file you turn into PDF-A, you decide to just keep the source document inside. I think there are even some scenarios where you might be required to do this. So we're hearing this from some government agencies and regulated industries. They have to archive everything. So even if everybody understands you will not be able to read the Excel spreadsheet 100 years from now. You still have to save it somewhere and be able in 99 years to pull it out and say, I have it. You can't read it, not my fault. Yeah? But I did not destroy it. I did not leave it behind. And it's obvious, if it's important enough 99 years from now to read the file, if it's really, really very important, you may find a way to actually read it. You create the software that is needed to do this. It's thinkable. It's not typical, but it's thinkable. And then you have the Personenstandsregister, the registry of birth certificates. Today they have PDF A1 and XML, and in the future they may have PDF A3 with the XML inside. Would make their life so much easier. We have, I don't know, I've forgotten the exact number. We have, I think, 3,000 registry in Germany, because sometimes relatively small, in rural areas, you have a very small agency taking care of this. So we have three. If you think, you go to a village, and there's this old guy looking to retire next year, not that much into IT, and he's taking care of this. And by law in Germany, he has to do it in an electronic way, and he has to deal with this stuff. If he has a nice system, the system does it for him. But you know how things are in some cases, and it's just safer if he has only to move around one file instead of two files, including the risk of losing one or mixing them up or whatever. So PDF A3 would be easier for this guy. And that's already the end of my presentation. I hope it gave you some idea what the difference is between the flavors of PDFA. PDFA1 no embedding, PDFA2 embedding yes, but only PDFA. PDFA3 embedding yes, whatever you want. Any questions?
I have a question about the use cases for PDFA3 with arbitrary embedding. It seems that a zip file can be used if you just want to concatenate a bunch of files together without any relationship. And one reason one might choose a PDF container over a zip file is that historically, PDFs have been allowed to be attached and sent places where a zip file might not be. Is the acceptance of arbitrary binary attachments that, as you say, could include malware or anything, going to erode that advantage of PDF in sort of getting through, firewalls and stuff like that?
That's a very interesting question. So whatever is the next thing in the world of viruses and whatever, you will have to deal with that. So they have figured out how to turn JPEG files into the starting point of a virus and bots and whatever you have.
Nothing's safe anymore.
Yeah,
Anything could be a vector for a virus.
Yeah. So there are large corporations, when you send a .zip file, they just reject it. You have to call it .zzz just. One other trick is to encrypt the stuff so they can't look inside, and you know all the tricks. So there's no safe file format, and there will always be some strategy to get through some firewalls and mail filters, and tomorrow you may not be able to get through anymore. So at least in the long term, it doesn't matter whether zip or PDF is easier to handle today through email or similar mechanisms. It can change any day anyway. And I think that antivirus developers will have to take maybe embedded files in PDF into account to a higher degree than they may have done in the past, and just sneak inside and find out whether there's some virus sitting there or some rootkit or whatever.
For the use case of embedding the XML into PDFA, I wonder whether it wouldn't be also possible to put it into XMP with an extension system.
Yeah.
Was that considered?
That's a long or an even never-ending discussion. And in some cases, it's the right thing to do, and in some other cases, not. My reply to that is always that XMP is metadata. So if it's data about the document, adding some descriptive information, making categorization easier, pointing out reference to some other stuff, I think XMP is a good place. If it's the actual data, like in the case of birth certificates, the XML is the actual data, and then you have the PDFA as a rendering of the data for display. In this case, even if you only had 3 data fields, which could easily go inside the XMP, I would say it's not the right way to do it, because it's the data. It's not the data about. There's no final yes or no. I'm just presenting my point on that. I know that, for example, the European Patent Organization has, I don't know, 100 or 150 fields inside their XMP. So you can get arbitrarily complex also on the XMP side. Sometimes difficult to decide. The other thing is you have to find out what you want to do with the data, who's interacting with the data. As you all know, and then very unfortunately, we don't have that many elegant tools to look at XMP. So if you're looking for visual display, it's not very promising. We don't have that many mechanisms and tools that interact with XMP in a very comprehensive way. Most tools are only prepared to look for lists of key value pairs, which is very unfortunate because XMP has a much richer data model. At the same time, there's numerous tools that can easily handle XML. Some of them are free of charge, some of them are inexpensive. People understand XML by now quite well. You give something to a developer and tell him to do something with XML, he will not ask basic questions. He will just get the job done properly. This might not be true with XMP. So these are just some thoughts.
XMP is also XML.
Yeah.
XML.
But you have to interact with the XML in a specific way. So.
With any XML, you have to interact in a specific way.
Okay. Yeah.
But then what are you going to do? You're going to say, okay, there's an infinite number of different file types. If it's a image encoding or a video encoding, an audio encoding or a spreadsheet encoding, then you put it in this way. And if the encoding of this thing happens to be in XML, you're going to hang it at a different point in the PDF file. That's an inconsistency. Surely it's much better to say whatever the encoding of the data, you put it in this dictionary, irrespective of the type, as opposed to saying, well, if the encoding just happens to be this, then bury it somewhere else. That way you always have to look in 2 places for attachments if you're going to possibly attach it to XMP. That doesn't make so much sense.
It's probably going to be a discussion for a while, and we are definitely proponents of XMP, so we have invested a lot in XMP technology. And I'm the last one to discount XMP and its value, but I had to accept the fact there's a lot of reluctance with other developers to really do something useful and comprehensive in the field of XMP. But it's not prohibited. So already in PDFA1, you can use comprehensive data sets and encode them inside XMP and pull them out and do something with them. Yep.
There's sometimes used the term PDF portfolios instead of collections. Just the same, or is it
I always get confused myself. Portfolios are the Navigators thing. Is it? I think so. Yeah. Yeah, so collection is the simple thing, and portfolios and Navigators are the rich thing. And I think portfolio is a term in a product. It's not a term in the specification.
But I don't need to have the collections to use the embedded files. It's not this.
No. Yes, please.
More cosmetic one in terms of naming it, but do you think it's going to confuse people that the A3 standard is not compatible with the A2? Would it be better to name it something like AE for today? Because it's going to confuse people, isn't it? If you say 3 is going to be perceived to be better than 2, don't you think?
You don't know how much time we spent just discussing naming. And for example, I have tried both in the PFX committee and also in the PDFA committee to come up with a completely different approach to names, to just avoid this thing is 1 is less than 2 or something like that. And just to maybe find names of cities or rivers or something that is kind of far away from the actual topic. And we could call PDF A1 River Rhine, and the other one is River Hudson, and whatever. And then we wouldn't have to argue about which is better or more important or more recent or whatever. I didn't get through. And yeah, so there's maybe another standard that is good for archiving that's coming up soon. That's PDF A-2. I think I mentioned it in my engineering session, where I think 2/3 of the value proposition are about archiving. So it does a few other things as well. And we were also thinking, should we name it PDF AE, archiving for engineering or something like that, or PDF EA, engineering for, and it's probably going to be called PDF E2, because that's the one thing that everybody in the end can agree to. The ISO committees have never been good at marketing when it comes to names, because if you look at the many ways how you can write PDF A3, where to put the slash and the minus or not, you see it's not a smart way to do this. But it was started like that in 1999 when we started work on PDFX, and then the pattern was just maintained. Sorry for that. Okay, any other questions? Okay, thank you very much.